Let's break this down. So this all started with this very image. This image is from a video that came out on April 13th. This was the season 2 PV trailer. It showcases Seed and Orpheus. Now let's talk about Orpheus first. So for a handful of people, Orpheus had what seemed to be a very fierce and serious face, and her stance, her expression, made her seem like she was some sort of boss or she was some sort of leader. However, those were all just assumptions. But the important part is this. We had to sit with this trailer for 40 days before we got any more news on Orpheus or even season 2. So in those 40 days, those assumptions, they began to solidify. And they solidified into concrete, which means people were sold on their opinions, thoughts, wants, and desires for the personality of Orpheus. So now we fast forward to May 23rd, 2025, where not only is Orpheus's personality not what people were expecting, but it is indeed the complete opposite of what they wanted. So from that perspective, you can kind of understand where those individuals are coming from. But this is where the clash in the community begins, because the people who like Orpheus are combating those people by saying, did you really think you were going to understand someone's entire personality based off of 3 seconds of a teaser? That's where the argument begins between the people who like Orpheus and don't like Orpheus for those reasons. And also, I'm not too sure about this one, I haven't seen it myself, but people are up in arms because Magus does most of the work in combat, whereas Orpheus doesn't really do much. So, at the end of the day, people really wanted Orpheus to be someone that she's not, and they were expecting a different personality from her. There's not too much hate around Orpheus, it's just that specifically, and that only. To my knowledge, at least. I don't think there's really any design disliking about Orpheus, it's more so the personality. But for anybody who is upset, or anybody who's neutral, you can always wait for her trailers, her demos, her content, her story quest perhaps. You can sort of maybe get more of a grasp on her character and see why things led down this path. And supposedly there was a leaked story synopsis about Orpheus that portrayed her to be what people assumed she was going to be. I haven't seen that. If you guys can find something like that, you guys can let me know. But as far as Orpheus goes, that's all. Now as for Seed, things began with the same video and the same couple of frames. On one hand, a lot of people in the community began to think that this will just be a mech and that's it. It'll be a mech, controls itself, fully functional, and that's the end all be all. Some other people thought, dude, what if in the mech there's a girl inside, like Firefly from Starro? No, but they wouldn't do that again. They already did it in Starro. They're not gonna like literally repeat the same character. They wouldn't do that. I don't know, man. I mean, they might, but you got a point though. They probably wouldn't do it again, you know? There were a lot of thoughts and opinions, but mostly it was all excitement. Then we arrived at the 2.1 story. And in that story, you can't miss it. There's Orpheus and Magus, there's Trigger, there's Soldier 11, and then there's also Seed. Now you can communicate with Seed, it's not voiced, but if you look above Seed's dialogue, you can see it says light, floaty voice. And after that dialogue, it actually mentions in Belle's head, a feminine airy voice is coming from the mech. It doesn't sound like the mech system. Wait, I've heard this voice before, so she's Seed. So basically kind of says like, okay, this is not just a computerized voice. This is a supposedly human, or at least android, inside controlling the mech. So if you did notice that, you knew that something was up, but you still didn't know if Seed was going to be next or not. Even the Hawkshin website that has the actual beta information for the upcoming patch, even that mentioned Orpheus and Magus and Kamino Monato. At this point in time, we were 2 weeks into the patch. There were no pictures yet for the characters, but it was Orpheus, Magus, and then Kamino. So we were expecting to get Kamino for the people who actually look at this site. Not to mention, the drip market seemed like it took a lot longer than usual because in this current patch, it's actually extended by a week. So we were more eager than usual for the drip to actually happen. So when it finally did happen, we were all shocked. No pun intended. Now, as far as her design goes, that is subjective. I've seen a lot of, wasted potential. I've seen a lot of this character looks too little, and I've seen she doesn't fit Obel Squad. For instance, one comment reads, advertised as mecha but turns out to be another girl is just so wasted. Expected mecha combat, not a very generic design girl. She have that NPC aura. With Scooter Rover around on battlefield, instead stay inside mecha like a good pilot does. Can't express how much disappointment I felt on Seed. Expected defense class but turned out another attacker. I myself don't pay attention to characters that much, but Seed is just utter disgrace to me. Plus, they include the zoom in to her feet every time she casts her ult is disgusting. This comment is not from YouTube, it's not from Reddit, or even Twitter. This is actually from Hyoverse's own website, Hyolab. Personally, I draw some dots back to Orpheus, where I feel like they kind of had the same thing happen there. They were expecting one thing and they got something else. Now, what's important to mention as well for Seed is, even though Seed got drip marketed and we saw Seed, we didn't see what's inside of Seed. So that's the part that actually is a shell shock for people. Once again, no pun intended, because we never saw that before. Usually we see the characters, but this time we did, but we also didn't. But aside from her design, there's also a handful of people who are upset with her role and class. We have Anton as an A rank, he's an electric attacker. We have Haramasa, electric attacker, and notably zzzero Anby, an electric attacker. Some feel that this class is being a bit oversaturated with the specifics of electric attacker. Some are fearful that Seed will take over zzzero Anby's spot, and also maybe even take some of her teammates for herself. Basically, they're scared of Anby sort of being put under Seed, and Seed just being this new best thing that's very powerful, and essentially just full on power creeping Anby. There's also concerns about the gameplay balance. How often are we going to play as Seed the girl? How often are we going to play as Seed the giant mech? Seed Jr. and Seed Sr. And last, but certainly not least, it appears someone at Hyoverse seems to be very much into feet. And it's very evident with this brand new character. Could they have done it in a more tasteful way? Tasteless way? That one we'll save for after school. So overall, when it comes to Seed, primarily I think people just wanted Seed to be Seed the giant robot, and that's it. Some people are just definitely not happy with who Seed is inside the mech, and then some are upset with the gameplay aspect of the role and her class. However, if you are excited for Seed, if you're excited for Orpheus and Magus as well, strap in. This is going to be a longer patch than usual, but when the time is approaching, we'll get those trailers, we'll get those demos. Maybe people will have a change of heart. We'll see. But that will... Oh. That's the bell. Class dismissed.